First tonight to Sudan, where a fragile truce appears to be holding as Western and African nations race against time to evacuate nationals escaping the fighting. The evacuations come amid growing fears of a civil war as the army and RSF paramilitary troops vie for control. Several previous ceasefires have failed to stop the violence. 11 days of conflict between the rival forces have left more than 450 people dead and thousands injured. Those who remain face shortages of food, fuel and medical facilities. And the World Health Organization has warned of the high risk of an extremely dangerous biological hazard after the National Public Laboratory containing infectious disease samples was seized by fighters. Arise News Chief Correspondent John Cookson begins our coverage.
Safe at last, dozens of Kenyans airlifted out of Sudan by a military mercy flight, and a clearly traumatized businesswoman glad to be back on Kenyan soil.
I thank God because I'm home finally. I've gone through a lot of trauma in Sudan.
Yes.
And I worked from my apartment when the shooting was still going on because I really wanted to utilize the 72-hour ceasefire. And I managed to walk between those people
Thank God.
without any harm.
This is Djibouti, where flights are arriving day and night as the airlift of thousands gathers momentum. Rescued British citizens have criticised the government, saying it's been too slow to act.
By now it's 6-7 days into the conflict and you're thinking, come on, what's our government going to do for us? The same message comes through. Sit tight, sit tight, sit tight. They're still being told today to sit tight. As Brits trapped in Khartoum, they must be asking themselves, why have we been left?
Among the evacuated, young children like an Irish girl, Nadine, reliving the trauma of Khartoum.
It was scary because all of us, we had to sleep on the floor and we were scared of bullets coming in. And then one time we were all sitting in the sitting room and we were relaxed, we were watching TV, a documentary. And then all of a sudden, and we thought a bullet hit our window or a bomb because our window started shaking and it was so loud and it scared us.
And still they come, a race against time before the truce expires. But in the past, ceasefires have not held. Each faction, one led by General Burhan and the other by General Dagalo, blaming the other.
It is important to remember that ceasefires have been announced and have fallen apart in the past, so the situation remains dangerous, volatile and unpredictable. I've spoken either directly or through intermediaries with the leaders of the factions on the ground, calling for them to allow British nationals, dual nationals and minors to be evacuated, and we will continue to push for the maintenance of this ceasefire.
Today, Khartoum remains volatile, with reports of sporadic gunfire despite the truce, but thousands are making it to safety. John Cookson, Arise News.
East Africa correspondent Mark Bichachi has been monitoring developments in the region, and he joins me now live from the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Good to see you, Mark. So a glimmer of hope, but the fighting hasn't stopped altogether, has it? To what extent is it holding?
In fact, it is being called a lull now because many people are still experiencing heavy artillery fire and sounds of gunshot in parts of Sudan. So it is not an entire ceasefire. It is a corridor that has helped many people to exit. There is a UN convoy headed to Port Sudan. There is many people who've been able to exit to Egypt, many countries, including Kenya, South Africa, South Korea, and many others have also in recent hours been able to evacuate their staff and their citizens. So what it seems like is the international community has prevailed on the generals to allow for a lot less fighting, and that has helped a lot more countries to exit their citizens. But the situation still remains dire for the Sudanese.
And as you said, Mark, ceasefires have a poor precedent in Sudan. Many have fallen apart in the past. So one imagines there's a lot of tension and danger and volatility in the air. Nevertheless, we've seen videos on social media showing civilians walking on the streets for the first time in days, but they also show that virtually every building has been damaged.
Yes, indeed. There is a lot of damage throughout Khartoum. Civilians were able to walk out. Those who are able to exit Khartoum have actually done so, citing the high cost and the tensions, even leaving the city, thanks to the blockades that one faces when you're dealing with the various armed forces. So basically, it is a situation where those in Khartoum who feel trapped are stuck there, or those who are ill or do not have the resources to move, then they are stuck there. Those who are able to get into the buses and move to places like Egypt, which has accepted a lot of refugees, Chad, and people, many internationals are then heading to Port Sudan, where they're hoping to be airlifted out of Port Sudan into Djibouti, Saudi Arabia, and other neighboring countries.
And there is that warning, Mark, from the World Health Organization of the high risk of an extremely dangerous biological hazard after the National Public Laboratory containing infectious disease samples was seized by fighters. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, it is very alarming that this particular lab was taken over. It's not clear yet which faction has taken it over, but the World Health Organization does say that there are various serious contagions contained therein. And given the history about how the military has even treated hospitals where people are actually being treated, it is quite worrying. It's not just the laboratory as an infrastructure that is important to Sudan that has actually come under attack. The army is also blaming the RSF for attacking the exchange, the national internet exchange in Khartoum. So the internet penetration in Sudan has dropped to 2%. So the dangers are not just in terms of the hospitals, it is also now in terms of communication and the contagion that could be released from that laboratory if the military do not allow that laboratory staff to continue working and keeping the various diseases therein contained safely.
So, Mark, a shaky 72-hour ceasefire. What happens when the truce ends?
Well, it is widely expected that once, and many people believe that the pressure for the truce is about the international citizens leaving Khartoum. It is widely expected that there'll be worse conflict moving forward because the generals have not subjected themselves to any form of negotiation, any form of talks. So it is expected that it shall go back into a full-scale battle. We have not seen or had any word of them agreeing to sit down, Charles.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Mark Bichachi, Arise East Africa correspondent, talking to me there from Nairobi.